Lesson number 2. The truth about the untold history. According to the Declaration of Indigenous Rights, indigenous people are those who embody historical continuity with societies which existed prior to the conquest and settlement of their territories by Europeans, as well as people brought involuntary to the New World. It's very important to know the real history, world history, European history, and dismiss the black and white game, and if you don't, you are already caught in the trap. It's all about status. Recognizing what law is, what it is not, and what brings it about can help you tremendously. If you don't understand the political evolution of how the European colonists established government here, and the interchangeable relationship with the indigenous people who were already here, then you can't fully understand the evolution of law in this country. There is 2 people on this planet, and that is Asiatic, original people, and Occidentals, hybrid people, and everyone else is a blend of the 2. After the Spanish Inquisitions and Christian Crusades, books of the ancient world were burned on a massive scale and hidden in secret lodges and libraries so they could create the state of mind that our people are in today. Moor is short for Moroccan. Moroccans are descendants of the ancient Moabites which inhabited North Central and South Africa, across the Atlantic into North Central and South America, including Mexico and the adjoining islands. Believe it or not, the pyramids in the Yucatan Peninsula, Central America, are older than the pyramids in Egypt and are not different cultures, but variations of the same culture because the Moorish people were on both sides of the Atlantic. As they fell under the Romans, legally they fell under the name Moors. That was the last legal name of the aboriginal indigenous people in the Western Hemisphere. See Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1787. When dealing with law, you have to be in your proper status legally, and that includes your national status, not Negro, Black, Colored, Latino, artificial person, which gives this corporate identity faking as government, jurisdiction. Moors are the descendants of the ancient Moabites. The true indigenous peoples who inhabited the northwest and southwestern continents, lands of ancient Amexem/Al-Marak, now called the Americas, North, Central, South, and the adjoining islands, through the reconstruction of historical writings, the Dark Period. These peoples and their land have been renamed or branded to confuse the people concerning the true geographical location of their native lands which are under siege, colonization. Moors are bound to the continents of America by heritage and birthright. Moors are not citizens of the Union States Society, but are the people of the continental United States, being part and parcel of the government to which the Union of States are obligated. We are what a lot of people would refer to as de jure. One of the most detrimental but most successful plans for world conquest is when the sociologists created the artificiality of race. The artificiality of race was created by making adjectives, something that describes, into nouns, something that is, in order to divide and conquer the indigenous people of these lands and steal their birthrights and inheritance. To solve this once and for all, we are all one broad extended human family, which is broken down into smaller families called nationalities. That's it. The race game was played to divide and conquer by hiding people's true national names, nationality, and rebranding them as African Americans, Native Americans, Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Haitians, Jamaicans, Virgin Islanders, Pacific Islanders, Indian, blacks, Negroes, colored, which allowed them to steal their inherent birthrights. If they got them to believe that they were all different people, then it would be easy to divide and conquer them. Anyone with melanin in their skin here in the Western Hemisphere are considered of Moorish/Moabite/Moroccan/Al-Moroccan, American ancestry. Melanin is what causes the pigmentation in the skin of these darker colored intentionally misbranded people. You are able to break someone's consciousness by breaking their history, because if they don't know who they are, then you can tell them who they are. The Moors. The Ameru Washital Mers, Moors, were originally a group of priests from Egypt, also known as the Dogon/Olmecs/Mayans. The term Washita is a corruption of Ursata, the father and mothers of the mystics. In Egyptian, Ursata is Orishet, the winged sun disk, which symbolizes the highest knowledge, the pineal gland being open. Egypt was once the capital of the world. In fact, the pharaoh gave the ancient Moabites, Moors, permission to settle Morocco, which is now North Africa. The Moabites migrated to modern-day America and called her Al-Morocco, which is another root for the word America. The last of the Al-Moroccan government fell in 1956 with the abolishment of the consular court when black people accepted civil rights over their natural rights as natural persons. Here is a definition of consular court. A tribunal convened by public officials who reside in a foreign country to protect the interests of their country for the settlement of civil cases based upon situations that happened in the foreign nation and which is held pursuant to authority granted by treaty. The 1787 Morocco Treaty of Peace and Friendship was that treaty. A consular court exercises criminal jurisdiction in some instances, but its determinations are reviewable by the courts of the home government. The last of the U.S. consular courts of Morocco was abolished in 1956. The 1787 Morocco Treaty of Peace and Friendship was a means to try to stop all of the fighting over land, so the Moors brought the Europeans to the table to form a peaceful two-system government, one for the Moors and one for the Europeans. Evidence of this two-system government can be found on the back of a $1 bill. Notice the two seals. You see one of a pyramid with an eye above it, which was the Moorish seal, and the other seal is that of an eagle holding 13 arrows, which is the European seal. Another example of this two-system government is the consular court, which was the Moorish court system. The last one was abolished in 1956 according to the above definition, and this consular court was granted its authority by treaty, that is, the 1787 Morocco Treaty of Peace and Friendship. The Europeans had and still do have their court systems, but it's just their system now. Empress Verdiesi Tiari Washita wrote in her book, The Return of the Ancient Ones, that 85% of the so-called blacks over here in America were already here before the slave trade. Only 15% of blacks come from Africa. We all come from Africa, but there is a suppressed history of blacks, Moors, being a global people. Pangea proves that all of the continents were connected, so migration to and from Africa and to other places was simple and easy. In the book, America BC, there is an alabaster egg of a cartouche of King Tut, found in Idaho. Africans and Native Americans, by Dr. Jack Forbes, states, the slave trade started in America and the slaves were taken mostly to Spain and Europe. When the Spanish came to America, they found the Indios, Indians, the people of color who are with God. All of the evidence proves that people of color, Moors, are the oldest natives in America, hands down. The African slave trade myth. Much of the African slave trade was fabricated and widely exaggerated. In the book, African and Native Americans by Jack D. Forbes, it says that the so-called Indians in Terra Nova, New Land, were Moors. He shows how many so-called Native American Indians were sold into slavery in Africa and in Europe. This is the opposite direction in which we were taught the slave trade went. These Native Americans or Indians were classified as Negroes and blacks in the slave books of Seville, Spain, and elsewhere. On page 29 he says, slaves from Terra Nova, New World, show up in the slave markets of Seville and Valencia very soon after 1500. For example, in Valencia during the period to 1516, we find in 1503, Miguel Man in 1505, Juan and Perdo in 1507, Antonio and Juana Marco in 1515, Ali, now Melchor, in 1516, Catalina. They were all classified as Negroes. Now think about this. If slaves were first brought to North America around 1619, according to school history books, then how were they taking slaves from Terra Nova to Europe all before 1520? Keep in mind that one of the Native Americans also had the name Ali, and all were reclassified as Negroes once they reached Seville and Valencia. How did a Native American have a Moorish name Ali in 1515? The 5 Nobel Moorish titles are El, Bey, Day, Al, and Ali. At least 3,000 so-called Indians are known to have been shipped from America to Europe between 1493 and 1501, called the Columbus Expeditions. Most show up in the Seville, Spain area where they seem to show up in the slave markets as Negroes. Black Moors were always in America. The missing Indians everyone has been searching for all this time are the Negroes that have been misclassified and brainwashed throughout generations. The slaves sold here in the South were initially Moors from right here in this hemisphere. It only made sense as they took the land here to enslave the inhabitants of those lands who called themselves Moors before Columbus renamed them Indians, thinking he had arrived in India. The tens of millions of Americans, so-called Indians, didn't all die in the Holocaust here in America. Many thousand were shipped to Europe and Africa as slaves. The whole slave trade myth is that the whole story was given to us in reverse. Let me explain. The whole story is that mass colonies of Africans were not shipped from Africa to America. The truth is that black Indians, Moors, were shipped from America to Europe, then from Spain to Africa as a commodity for African resources. Once the labor pool began to deplete from the Moors, Indians, in America because of death and suicide, the labor was replaced by those black Indians, Moors, in Africa, now misclassified as Negroes, and began to be shipped back to America. This part of the history is what the school system failed to mention in their history program. The gold and precious metals Columbus excavated from America fueled a 400% inflation that eroded the economies of non-European nations and helped Europe create a global market system. Africa suffered a great economic blow because the trans-Saharan trade collapsed, Africa's precious jewel and gem trade, because America began supplying more precious metal and gems, which almost wiped out Western Africa's global market position. Therefore, African traders only had one commodity that Europe wanted: slaves. As a result, African sultans sold their own people into slavery to Europeans. It is safe to say that Christopher Columbus is solely responsible for the slavery of the Moors from west to east and east to west. Above is a picture of a big-bottom ship. As you can see, this is what was supposed to transport 300 to 400 African slaves from Western Africa to the Americas. These trips would have taken 3 to 4 months at a time with the slaves packed head to foot like sardines. It was noted that the slaves urinated and defecated on themselves throughout the voyage. Now come on, do you really believe that 300 to 400 large-bodied people could even survive a 3 to 4 month trip packed like sardines and using the bathroom on each other? They would have literally drowned in their own waste. It just doesn't make sense. We were already here. In Central America, archaeologists have found multi-ton stone heads which had large noses, a distinctively non-European trait, predating the Great Pyramids of Egypt. The first known civilization in America, Central America, was called the Olmec, Old Mex. The Olmec people built large multi-ton heads with uniquely African features, wide nose, large lips, proving that the first people here in America were distinctively Moorish. What we see as and call Indians, Native Americans, today are actually descendants of the Olmecs, Moors, mixed with Mongolian. Why is this information suppressed? Well, Europeans want you all to believe that people of color, Moors, only come from Africa to keep the land they have taken and not feel so guilty about it. If you can distort the history of the bloodshed for the land, you can appear more humane. That's exactly what they did. They wrote a his story book after they were firmly established to tell his story more humanely. The American History Book has been a great success because it has most of the world blind as to what really happened. People of color, Moors, are universal. They tried to call us Africans, but we are Asiatic, meaning we span and originate from every place on earth: Africa, Asia, India, Australia, all the islands, etc. We are the original Native Americans. Ask yourself, who was here before 1492? What was here in operation? Who were the people? What kind of systems and laws did they live by? Answer: the natural people, the mud-colored people, who are the founders of civilization, and the mothers and fathers of the human family, were called Moors, Moors, Moor, Moor, Moors, Moor, Morans, Moroccan, Al-Moroccans, etc. These are some of the dialectical pronunciations according to varied languages, such as Moorish Latin, Middle English, Germanic, French, Greek, etc. Who is original man and woman? Answer: the ancient Moabites, Murs, Moors, the Asiatics sometimes referred to as Mu, Lemurians, and in latter history, Canaanites, Africans. Are we all Americans? Answer: assuming this question is directed to the dark olive Asiatic aboriginals of the land, the response is that the Moors are the true possessors of the present Moroccan Empire, which spans from Tamari, now called Africa, even across the Great Atlantis, and includes northwest, central, and southwest Amexem and the Atlantis Islands. These geographical areas are now called America, North, Central, South, and the adjoining islands. Who is this man Amerigo Vespucci that Europeans claim America was named after? Answer: Amerigo Vespucius was a European of Italian descent, and a neophyte explorer who sailed from the Moorish city of Cadiz, to learn of latitudinal and longitudinal imaginary grid line used by the Moors for navigating the earth, particularly using the sextant to measure one heavenly body in relation to another against the horizon for determining longitude and latitude positions while at sea or on the oceans. What is this name Amexem that the Moors claimed the Americas was called? Answer: Amexem is the ancient name of the lands known as, including North, Central, and South America. Who is Christopher Columbus, and if he is the one who discovered America, why was this continent not named after him? Answer: Christopher Columbus was a European inquisitionist whose actual mission was theft and murder by genocide, initiated for Christendom against the aboriginal Moabite, Moorish tribes of Western Hemisphere. The continent was not named after Colombo because he didn't discover America, Amaru, America. Amexem already had its name and was already a highly cultured and thriving civilization. Who are the Native Americans? Answer: Native American is another contemporary sociology term or disassociation conquest tag, an invented construct of European conquerors. It, like many other misnomers and tags, is not a national identity of the Aboriginals, but is a political status class designation designed to expand upon social and political divisions, displacement, and confusion amongst the Aboriginal Moors of the Americas. Are we black, brown, red, yellow, white people? Answer: no. Asiatics are not black, brown, red, yellow, orange, light-skinned black, purple, plaid, or green people, etc. The human family, collectively, is identified and known by nationalities and pedigree names, not by crayon colors. This deep sign of mental ignorance was promoted by inquisitionists to denationalize the rightful heirs and inheritors of the land, America, all Morocco. However, the Europeans were calling themselves red men prior to the political adaptation of the political status, white men, in the 1854-63. This caste adaptation was initiated by Horace Greeley, a newspaper tycoon from New York. He influenced the transformation of the Whiggamore Whigs Party into the Republican Party during the establishment of the Knights of Columbus and Ku Klux Klan, oath of 1854 to 1863, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Chicago, Illinois, United States of North America. It must be further understood that the term free white person is a social caste appellation in jurisprudence and nothing to do with complexion of skin. Free white persons. As you see above, free white person includes Moorish and exclusively says, does not mean Caucasian race, Aryan race, or Indo-European races, nor the mixed Indo-European, Dravidian Semitic, or Asiatic birth and descent will not be entitled to become a naturalized citizen of the United States. Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. The phrase white people has nothing to do with skin complexion and everything to do with status. This caste adaptation was initiated by Horace Greeley, a newspaper tycoon from New York. The white caste was adopted/stolen by the Whiggamore Party, now known as the Republican Party, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, between 1852 and 1863. What did they call themselves before then, you ask? They called themselves R.E.D.men. The term white is an ancient caste status term, which applies to status and not to complexion of skin. The artificiality of race was created by making adjectives, something that describes, into nouns, something that is, in order to divide and conquer the indigenous people of these lands and steal their birthrights and inheritance. Did you know that the family of nations will not recognize you as a member of the human race if you do not have a nationality, and that you are considered a refugee? See U.S. Immigration and Nationality Act, Section 101, A, 42, and Section 207E. Remember, black is a color, not a nation. Even though Europeans call themselves white, if you ask them their nationality, they'll tell you Irish, German, Scottish, Dutch, etc. If people ask most black people today, they say that they are African American. But Africa is not a country, it is a continent with over 50 countries in it. America isn't just specific to North America. There are 3 Americas, North, Central, and South, with many countries encompassed within it as well. The term African American doesn't identify with any specific geographical location, i.e. nation, in the human family. The Moors. Sundry Act of 1790. The Moors. Sundry Act of 1790 was passed by South Carolina legislature, granting special status to the subjects of Sultan of Morocco, Mohammed bin Abdallah. It recognized Moors as white people with jury duty as a privilege. Moors were not to be subjected to laws governing blacks and slaves. On January 20, 1790, a petition was presented to the South Carolina House of Representatives from a group of 8 individuals who were subjects of the Moroccan emperor and residents of the colony. They desired that if they happened to commit any fault amenable to be brought to justice, that as subjects to a prince allied with the United States through the Moroccan-American Treaty of Friendship, they would be tried as citizens instead of under the Negro Act. The free Moors, Francis, Daniel, Hammond, and Samuel petitioned on behalf of themselves and their wives Fatima, Flora, Sarah, and Clorinda. They explained how some years ago, while fighting in defense of their country, they and their wives were captured and made prisoners of war by the Portuguese. After this, a certain Captain Clark had them delivered to him, promising they would be redeemed by the Moroccan ambassador residing in England and returned to their country. Instead, he transported them to South Carolina and sold them for slaves. Since then, by the greatest industry, they purchased freedom from their respective masters. They requested that as freeborn subjects of a prince in alliance with the U.S., that they should not be considered subject to a state law, then in force, known as the Negro Law. If they be found guilty of any crime or misdemeanor, they would receive a fair trial by lawful jury. The matter was referred to a committee consisting of Justice Grimke, General Charles Pinckney, and Edward Rutledge. Free Moors petition, ruling. Edward Rutledge reported from the committee referred to the Free Moors petition. The order for immediate consideration of the matter was read and agreed to as follows. They have considered the same and are of opinion that no law of this state can in its construction or operation apply to them, and that persons who were subjects of the Emperor of Morocco being free in this state are not triable by the law for the better ordering and governing of Negroes and other slaves. Again, those who remember that they were Moors used the Free Moor Sundry Act and the Moroccan Treaty of Peace and Friendship to secure their status. Those who were brainwashed into thinking they were Negroes, descendants of Africans brought by Europeans, were not protected by the Moroccan Treaty, Articles of Confederation, or the Constitution. Honor your father and mother. Ephesians 6:2. According to the Declaration of Indigenous Rights, indigenous people are those who embody historical continuity with societies which existed prior to the conquest and settlement of their territories by Europeans, as well as people brought involuntary to the New World. See http://bit.ly/c. JP-4. According to the above United Nations Treaty, all black people are indigenous. This means that blacks are natural persons. All natural persons are human beings and sovereigns of the land because they rightfully own the land. This is coming from the Black's Law Dictionary. Just look up natural persons. All blacks are beyond first-class citizens and don't even know it, because we have accepted his story and slave labels like Negro, black, and colored. What makes the above treaty so powerful is that according to Article V of the United States Constitution, treaties are the supreme law of the land. The United States of America is a part of the United Nations, so the government is bound by it. Sovereignty resides in your nationality. Your nationality ties you back to the land. What is your nationality? My nationality is Moorish. The Washita tribal Moors are listed at the United Nations under the Indigenous People Organization, number 21,593. This became effective in 1993. The seat number for the Washita at the United Nations is 215. According to international law, the Washita has established itself as a sovereign independent nation, United Nations, minus 21, New Israeli shekels, 593, apart from Corporate Union of 1781 and the Corporate United States of 1787. The land claim of the Washita has been affirmed by the Spanish and French, as well as British, pursuant to Spanish land grants of 1762 and 1795. According to federal law, the land of the Washita has been defined as Indian country, and the people regarded as Indians. Both the people and their land have been placed under the authority of the United States government via the Bureau of Indian Affairs within the Department of Interior, which is governed by both executive and congressional plenary powers. As a result, the United States has assumed the trust responsibility for the Washita Nation of Moors, via Spanish land grant of Henry Turner. You must know that there are 4 classifications of citizenship, from highest status to lowest status. 1. National citizen. 2. Political citizen, U.S. citizen. 3. Subject. 4. Alien. National citizen. The highest status in any country. A national citizen is a citizen who is attached to the land by birthright and bloodline and would be considered indigenous. These people have natural-born rights given to them by their creator that cannot be infringed upon with man-made statutes, codes, ordinances, etc. These people abide by common law, the Constitution and treaties, not by the millions of statutes made to infringe on the people and steal their resources. Political citizen, U.S. citizen, second highest status in any country. This is the status that most people in America have today. These citizens have agreed, either knowingly or unknowingly, to the statutes, regulations, and policies of the corporation of the United States, or their respective country. These citizens are given a birth certificate with an all-capital letters name that looks just like theirs, but are really a corporate identity, corporation made to look like your name. These citizens' natural-born rights are taken away and in return are given privileges. Subject/ward of state. These people are people who reside in a country but have no rights. Alien. This is the lowest status in any country. This is someone who is from one country but resides in another illegally. If one doesn't understand the different classifications of citizenship, then one tends to operate in other jurisdictions and in their own community not understanding their legal status. And status is the first issue at law, because that determines your capacities and incapacities of operations of dealings with rights, recourses, legal matters in society. Status, jurisdiction, adjudication. These things are convoluted with us because we don't know civics. The first issue at law that comes before any lawful court is status/nationality. For example, it is important for indigenous people of this land to let the courts know their national citizen status, and at that moment the courts will not have jurisdiction over them. On the other hand, if they did not put their nationality on record, then they would be fined, imprisoned, and treated just as the other strawmen and women have been for all of these years. The period of Reconstruction. The Moroccan Treaty of Peace and Friendship allowed the Europeans to do commerce in this Moorish empire in a 10 by 10 square mile designated area which is now called Washington, D.C. In an attempt to expand their territory and power, some Europeans have and are still trying to overthrow the treaty and de jure government that was already established in this land as the true republic. When children say the national anthem, and to the republic for which it stands, that is exactly what they are talking about. The Europeans began to overthrow it by attempting to steal the nationality and birthrights from the Moors by rebranding them Negro, black, and colored. Then, as of 1779, they retroactively, meaning went back after the fact, added the Nergo, black and colored brand/label into the history books. Also began burning books. Look up the Christian book burnings, burning documents, moving documents and books to secret lodges, Masonic lodges, making new records and listing the Moors as black, Negro, and colored. They would move the children from the southeast to the northwest, and the children from the northeast to the southwest, and so on in order to separate the sons from the mothers, which would also separate the family from its heritage, because the women held the principles of civilization. The evidence of Moorish heritage in this land was supposed to be hidden for 300 to 1,000 years, and that accepted social construct is really what the period of Reconstruction was all about in the United States. People are wrongly under the impression that Columbus and the Inquisitionists established government and the United States. Wrong. The United States already existed. The United States was a united coalition of Moorish tribes that they mistakenly called Indians. On my father's side of the family is what they call Blackfoot, and on my mother's side is what they call Cherokee, and I'm not Indian. The word Indian is a brand. Some tribes sold out, but most didn't, which didn't constitute an agreement with the entire nation, although the government will say it did. That's why they had to murder so many of them and separate the mothers who carried the principles of civilization from the children. One of the commitments of the Inquisitionists was to wipe the Moorish heritage in this land out of history. That's why it is very hard to find a linear history when it pertains to people of color in the Western Hemisphere. But that is also why you have all these secret societies that consequently and curiously inside their lodges keep wearing the Moorish fez, headdress. But you never figured it out. They know who the Moors are, but don't want us to know because knowledge is power. They'll have badges on their cars and hats with the Moorish star, or the Eastern Star that say Medina, Morocco, and their noble title, Bey, noble title, on the headdresses and badges. They name all their Masonic lodges after women, the mother, because the Moors used to have a matriarchal society. Then they rewrite the history and tell us that we came from someplace else to steal our birthrights/nationality. The world knows exactly who the Moors are and are waiting for them to awaken. In secret, their existence is ritualized by those who sit in the seats of power, who have adopted their information and wear their noble titles, as shown in these above photos. Written right on their fez, hats. Top left, Islam, top right, Muslim, bottom left, Bey, bottom right, Morocco. These photos are from the George Washington Masonic Lodge. Masonry is an open secret of who the Moors are. One of the keys here also is that they can't deport the Moors to anywhere. That's why they have to keep building jails. Also, contrary to popular belief, the Stars and Stripes flag, red, white, and blue, does not identify with any bloodline or any native people. It is only a representation of an agreement between the Moorish nation that was already here and the Inquisitionists that wanted to operate in commerce in this land, Moroccan Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1787. Our public schools have done an intentional dumb down of information to keep us where we are at. For example, if you ask a child to point to America on the map, the child will only point at North America. What they fail to realize is that America includes South, Central, and North America. Who is the American president? Barack Obama? No, he is not the president of Brazil or the president of Mexico. But there is a United States of Central America and United States of Brazil, but we were never taught this. The term United States is only a generic term. There is no such thing as the American president. There are many American presidents, and there are many American flags from Alaska to Brazil and all the adjoining islands. The Stars and Stripes flag is not a flag of any native people. It arose from treaties of commerce. The continental flag of the people is a red flag with a cherry tree, George Washington's, chopping down the cherry tree. What really shook up and scared the secret societies and the elite ruling class of Europeans is when in 1913, Noble Drew Ali began issuing nationality cards to the indigenous people. What that began to establish is the true sovereign and true jurisdiction of this land. Just as if I were to go to Russia and try to start arguing law, they would first ask for my nationality card to check my status to see if I was even allowed to argue law in their jurisdiction. You can be a natural citizen, Moor/natural person of the land, or you can be a political citizen of an organized government, both of which require proof. People's concept of what slavery is in the Western Hemisphere is all wrong, because the government and policymakers are instituting and maintaining slavery bureaucratically, now not physically. Their tactics have changed, but we haven't learned or even been aware of what's going on and how to protect ourselves. I hope by a further reading of this book you will begin to open your eyes and begin to ask questions. Politicians, some of whom were former slaveholders at that time, created a fraudulent court called Admiralty Court, Traffic Court, and listed it under crimes, because the Constitution only allows two courts, the criminal and civil court. You can't try a criminal case in civil court, and you can't try a civil case in criminal court. So where did the Constitution set up traffic court to stop the people from freedom of passage over the land? Nowhere. The elements of a crime are harm, injury, or loss, and if these prerequisites are not met, then lawfully there is no crime. They prey upon our ignorance of the law in order to steal our money and control the masses. For example, all they have to do to break up your home is put an officer on your street corner and have him keep stopping you, which would result in him taking your license from you, therefore, causing you to no longer to be able to make a living. These are private corporate entities operating on a private charter, working with the policymakers to interfere with the rights of the citizens and the natural people. These corporations are robbing us legally, not lawfully. There is a big difference. People who consider themselves to be Negroes, blacks, colored, African American, Latino, cannot represent themselves at law because they are considered civiliter mortis, which means dead in the eyes of the law. One who is considered as if he were naturally dead, so far as his rights are concerned. This is because nowhere in law and nowhere on this planet is there a nationality called Negro, black or colored, or Latino. It doesn't exist. They are only brand names, not nationalities. But if you agree to be something that someone else created to name their chattel, NBC Negro, black and colored, it's your fault, not theirs, for your lack of knowledge. If you agree to be what they rebranded you to be, then true law does not apply to you because there is no such thing as Negro, black or colored in the human family, and the law only applies to natural humans. As a consequence, you have been subjected to the Christian Black Codes of 1724, which was implemented to govern such people who didn't know who they were. This is the reason they want to hide the Moorish connection, because the United States Republic came out of the dissolution of the Moroccan, Al-Moroccan, government here in this land, the United States of Al-Morocco. The Europeans were not indigenous to this land and did not have jurisdiction here, so they ended up bringing the law of the seas, admiralty and maritime, onto the land, and we didn't even debate it. We just started assuming that they had jurisdiction, and they assumed the jurisdiction that we gave them. This was the biggest mistake, and is what secured the very corruption that I'm talking about. They superimposed the law of the seas, admiralty and maritime, on top of the law of the land, common law, as evidenced by the yellow fringe around the flag that you see in every courtroom or office of government. That's why it is so important to understand and declare your nationality, because it begins to establish the truth about jurisdiction. We never questioned them, and they became secure. We became secure in the corruption of fiction, artificial persons, fiction of brand names, and the fiction of inferiority, while they became secure in a position of sovereign superiority and authority. The colonizers used deceit by way of semantics and wordplay such as residence, male, U.S. citizen, last name, and fictional regions, FL, PA, CA, TX, in order to expand their control, and got us to agree because our silence is acquiescence, or you agree by being silent and not challenging what happened. They also got us to agree to their other instruments that secure their jurisdiction over us, such as the birth certificate, driver's license, and social numbers. What we need to understand is the United States does not have lawful jurisdiction outside of Washington, D.C., Guam, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, and a few military bases. The laws of Congress with respect to those matters do not extend into the territorial limits of the states, but have force only in the District of Columbia and places that are within the jurisdiction of the national government. Caja versus the U.S. The United States is a foreign corporation with respect to the state, people. Volume 20. Corpus Juris Sect, 1785. Black's Law Dictionary, 5th edition states, a democracy is that form of government in which the sovereignty resides in as is exercised by the whole body of free citizens, directly or indirectly through a system of representation, simply stated. A democracy is the dictatorship of the majority over the minority, i.e. Negroes, blacks, coloreds, African American, Latinos, Hispanics, etc. In a democracy, the minority has no rights, only privileges granted by a condescending majority. These privileges are called civil rights. A minority is one who is stateless, Nationality Act, Sec. 101, A, 42, and Sec. 207, E. Without a nationality, you are considered a refugee. Negroes, blacks, coloreds, African American, Indian, Hispanic, and Latino are all considered minorities. A minority/minor does not mean what you think! Exclamation mark. A minor/minority is one who does not comprehend what is happening to him/her when a legal matter is being presented. A minority is one who doesn't know their true proper national status, not Negro, black, colored, Latino. A minor/minority is one who is incapable of presenting him or herself, therefore, needs to be represented by a prose cutter. Part 1, Article 5 of the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, states, every indigenous person has a right to a nationality. Under the 14th Amendment, your rights are taken, and in return, you are given privileges. However, you must agree to be Negro, black, colored, African American, Latino, Hispanics, etc. One agrees by accepting instruments of incorporation such as the birth certificate, driver's license, marriage license, and social security card, which are all unconstitutional and not challenging the brand by correcting your status. Once you learn about and begin to honor your ancestors by recognizing your true free national name, honor thy mother and father, then the jurisdiction of the United States Corporation is no longer applicable to you. They have considered the same and are of opinion that no law of this state can in its construction apply to them, and that persons who were subjects of the Emperor of Morocco being free in this state, here in America, are not triable by the laws for better ordering of the Negroes, Moors, Sundry Act of 1790. Act August 1, 1956, repealed sections 141 to 143, effective upon the date which the President determined to be appropriate for the relinquishment of jurisdiction of the United States in Morocco. Jurisdiction of Morocco was relinquished by memorandum of President Eisenhower on September 15, 1960. United States Code Title 22, Chapter 2, Section 141 to 143. People are not crayons. People have nationalities. Moors gave up their birthright when they accepted being branded Negro, black, and colored, gave up their culture, fell into servitude, and have been transacting business in alien names for generations, all the while thinking that they were secure. Article 15 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states, 1. Everyone has the right to a nationality. 2. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his nationality, nor denied the right to change his nationality. If you create a name or brand that was not artificial person, Negro, black, colored, then the law applies to that which you regulate in that jurisdiction. Once you get someone to agree to be in that jurisdiction or be what they are not, then you got them. This is what happened to us. We agreed to be something we were not, and under a jurisdiction that we did not have to be subject to because we agreed to be the name and brand that they created. But we had to do it willingly because everything in civilization operates on contract. That's why in court proceedings they ask you, do you understand? What they really mean is, do you agree, because they cannot proceed until they have your consent. The following are actual photos of European men who wear the fez behind closed doors, clandestine, in secret societies wherein they perform rituals, take oaths to demigods, and work hard to keep the light of truth regarding the North Gate, North America, Northwest Amexem, Northwest Africa, closed to the masses, even unto the mothers and fathers of civilization, who in fact taught them, Europeans, and brought them out of the Dark Ages during the European Renaissance. They taught through Masonic orders, Ma and Son, the science of the universe, the sacred lessons of life and nature, in an effort to civilize them and bring them into culturized society. The Europeans later created clandestine orders to keep the teachings amongst themselves. What we especially want to show in these photos is that not only are they wearing the fez, written atop them are Islam, El Bay, Muslim, and Morocco, to show they in fact are aware of Morocco, the empire and the subordinate kingdom, They are aware and practice Islam and know the true meaning of Muslim, and they are aware of the 5 noble titles, El, Bey, Dey, Al, and Ali. These titles were transferred and renamed as the 5 civilized tribes of acceptance during the so-called Indian agreements. However, many are aware now that this is not India. The people are indigenous, indigenes. The world knows exactly who the Moors are and are waiting for them to awaken. In secret, their existence is ritualized by those who sit in the seats of power, who have adopted their information and wear their noble titles, as shown in these above photos. Written right on their fez, hats. Top left, Islam, top right, Muslim, bottom left, El, Bey, bottom right, Morocco. These photos are from the George Washington Masonic Lodge. Malcolm X found out he was a Moor. We all know the story of Malcolm X, but it was never fully explained. Malcolm grew up as Malcolm Little, the later put an X in place of his last name Little, because obviously he was not honoring his foremothers and forefathers by wearing a European title as a last name. After the death of the Moorish Science Temple leader, Noble Drew Ali, the Nation of Islam was formed by a former high-ranking member who wanted to take over the Moorish Science Temple, but was not allowed, named Walter Farouk. He was succeeded by Elijah Muhammad, who was succeeded by who you know today as Minister Louis Farrakhan. The Nation of Islam was on the right track, but did not take it all the way home. They told him who he wasn't, Little, European title, and replaced it with an X, but failed to tell him who he was politically, historically, legally, and status-wise. We have all heard the story about Malcolm taking his pilgrimage to Mecca, and when he got there he found out that he was mistakenly under the impression that he was making a pilgrimage home. When the biggest revelation he ever got was revealed to him, you were already home, you left home. What he found out is that the North Gate, North America, was actually his home by birthright and heritage, not so-called Africa or Mecca. When Malcolm returned and found out the truth about who he was as a Moorish American, he then corrected his name and added Moorish titles to his name. He corrected his name to be El Hajj Malik El Shabazz. El is one of the 5 noble Moorish titles and further adds proof of his newfound understanding of who he was and who we are today. As a result of knowing this information, he was shortly thereafter assassinated. Below is a quote from one of his early interviews. Malcolm X. Well, Hannibal, the most successful general that ever lived, was a black man. So was Beethoven. Beethoven's father was one of the blackamoors that hired themselves out in Europe as professional soldiers. Haydn, Beethoven's teacher, was of African descent. And Solomon, great biblical characters. Columbus, the discoverer of America, was a half-black man. Whole black empires, like the Moorish, have been whitened to hide the fact that a great black empire had conquered a white empire even before America was discovered. The Moorish civilization, black Africans conquered and ruled Spain. They kept the light burning in southern Europe. The word Moor means black, by the way. Egyptian civilization is a classic example of how the white man stole great African cultures and makes them appear today as white European. The black nation of Egypt is the only country that has a science named after its culture, Egyptology. The ancient Sumerians, a black-skinned people, occupied the Middle Eastern areas and were contemporary with the Egyptian civilization. The Incas, the Aztecs, the Mayans, all dark-skinned Indian people, had a highly developed culture here in America, in what is now Mexico and northern South America. The $1 bill is a contract. The Great Seal of the Moorish Nation. Look familiar? On the back of the dollar bill. On the back of the $1 bill, we notice the government seal of the United States with the bald eagle holding the olive branch and the arrows. Question: if the eagle encompassed inside of the circle on the right-hand side of the bill is a government seal, then what is the pyramid symbol on the left-hand side encompassed inside of a circle? You got it. It's also a government seal. It is the seal of the original government that was already here in this land. That symbol has been flying here in government for thousands of years before the eagle and shield. The eagle and shield is the sanctioned government that was allowed to do business here in the 10 by 10 square mile of land called Washington, D.C. As you will notice, the word one is in the middle of the two seals, symbolically meaning the two governments are as one. You will also notice that this is the only bill that has not been changed. All the other bills have been colored or the faces enlarged. The $1 bill has never and will never change because it is actually a contract between the two nations. Every contract has to have two signatures, and on every dollar bill you will see that there are in fact two signatures. What was done was that the colonizers tried to hide the true meaning of that Moorish pyramid symbol and tell people that the only government in this land is the government under the seal of the eagle and shield, not the original government under the pyramid, the true republic guaranteed by the Constitution. We have to understand this history to understand the evolution of law, government and their statutes, codes and fines that steal our rights and freedoms. As you can see on the following map of the migration of the tribe of Ishmael, that the capital Morocco was where Cleveland, Ohio is currently. As I previously stated, the Olmec were the first people to inhabit Central America. Guess who are the descendants of the Olmec? The Mayans. The Mayans were often referred to as Black Mexicans or Quetzalcoatl, and are direct descendants of the Malian Moors. These ancient Mexican wall paintings depict these Moorish kings as rulers and are unmistakably Moorish. These Moors are responsible for building the pyramids all over South America, Peru, Alaska, Canada, and Georgia. Also, all along the Mississippi River and its basins are large mounds of tons of earth built by people who were called the mound builders. The mound builders are descendants of the Malian Moors and the Olmecs. These Moors eventually migrated to North America from Mexico and became known as the Washita, the Yamasee, and the Ben Ishmael tribe. The Ben Ishmael tribe is a collection of the Lenape, Wampanoag, and the Nottokok Indians who migrated to Illinois, Indiana, and Kentucky, and referred to themselves as Moors. You can see their migration in the map above with the capital city, Morocco. Even then, the government continued to classify them as Negro in order to strip them of their indigenous rights. The Moroccan Treaty of Peace of Friendship of 1787 between the Moorish nation and the United States government is the longest-standing treaty to date. On the first page of the treaty, you will see that Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin worked closely with Moors in the Continental Congress to make sure the treaty was secure. Article 6 of the Constitution states, "All debts contracted and engagements entered into before the adoption of this Constitution shall be as valid against the United States under this Constitution as under the Confederation. This Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding." Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin worked closely with, respected, and acknowledged the Moorish nation as far back as 1787. Why is this information not known today by the mass public? The treaty says, thus an act was passed in Massachusetts on the 6th of March, 1788, forbidding any Negro not a subject of the Emperor of Morocco or a citizen of the United States from tarrying in the Commonwealth. Meaning that those who considered themselves Negro and not Moorish, recognizing their nationality, could not tarry in the Commonwealth. Those who remembered that they were Moors used the Moroccan Treaty to secure their status. Those who were brainwashed into thinking they were Negroes, descendants of Africans brought by Europeans, were not protected by the Moroccan Treaty, Articles of Confederation, or the Constitution. Another quote from the treaty says, "A petition was presented to the House from sundry free Moors, 1790, subjects of the Emperor of Morocco, and residents of the state, praying that in case they should commit any fault amenable to be brought to justice, that they as subjects to a prince, here in North America, in alliance with the United States of America, via the Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1787, may be tried under the same laws as the citizens of the state would be liable to be tried, and not under the Negro Act," which was received and read. As you can see, you have Moors back in 1787 saying the same thing we are saying now. The nationality of the people of color here in the Western Hemisphere is Moorish, not black, not colored, not anything else. Do not be mistaken, African American is not a nationality, it's a brand. Black is not a nationality, it's a brand. Puerto Rican, Rich Port, is not a nationality, It's a brand. How the name Puerto Rican, Moors mixed with European and Asian, came to be is when translated into English it means rich port. In order to show the family's wealth, the women in the family would wear gold around their neck and wrist with no seam to take it off, and when the Europeans came and conquered, they cut the head and hands off of the women to get the gold. That's why they called it rich port. It's just a brand. Colored is not a nationality, it's just a brand. Negro is not a nationality, it's just a brand. Know the difference. Know your true history. It's all about divide and conquer. About letter from George Washington to the Sultan of Morocco, 1789. The letter to the Sultan of Morocco from President George Washington is one of the favorites amongst the documents of American history, as it clearly indicates the newly formed United States of America under the first Masonic president George Washington was subordinate to and dwelling on the dominions of the Moroccan Empire. Anything other than that holds no standing as to why George Washington would write a letter as such to the Sultan of Morocco. It indicates without contradiction that the Moors were in the superior position, that George Washington was the newly appointed President of the United States of America in the North American continent, under the rule and dominion of the Sultan of Morocco. Letter from George Washington to Mohammed ibn Abdullah, Sultan of Morocco. City of New York, December 1st, 1789. Great and magnanimous friend. Since the date of the letter which the late Congress, by their President, addressed to your Imperial Majesty, the United States of America have thought proper to change their government and institute a new one, agreeable to the Constitution, of which I have the honor herewith to enclose a copy. The time necessarily employed in the arduous task, and the disarrangements occasioned by so great though peaceable a revolution, will apologize, and account for your Majesty's not having received those regularly advised marks of attention, money, from the United States, which the friendship and magnanimity of your conduct toward them afforded reason to expect. The United States, having unanimously appointed me to supreme executive authority in this nation. Your Majesty's letter of August 17, 1788, which by reason of the dissolution of the late government remained unanswered, has been delivered to me. I have also received the letters which your Imperial Majesty has been so kind as to write, in favor of the United States, to the Bashaws of Tunis and Tripoli, and I present to you the sincere acknowledgments and thanks of the United States for this important mark of your friendship for them. We greatly regret the hostile disposition of those regencies toward this nation, who have never injured them, is not to be removed, on terms of our power to comply with. Within our territories, Washington, D.C., there are no mines, whether of gold or silver, and this young nation just recovering from the waste and dissolution of a long war, have not, as yet, had time to acquire riches by agriculture and commerce. But our soil is bountiful, and our people industrious, and we have reason to flatter ourselves that we shall gradually become useful to our friends. The encouragement which your Majesty has been pleased, generously, to give to our commerce with your dominions, meaning your lands, the punctuality with which you have caused the treaty with us, Treaty of Peace and Friendship, 1787, to be observed, and the just and generous measures taken in the case of Captain Proctor, make a deep impression on the United States, and confirm their respect for and attachment to your Imperial Majesty. It gives me great pleasure to have the opportunity of assuring your Majesty that, while I remain at the head of this nation, I shall not cease to promote every measure that may conduce to the friendship and harmony which so happily subsists between your empire and them, and shall esteem myself happy in every occasion of convincing your Majesty of the high sense, which in common with the whole nation, I entertain the magnanimity, wisdom, and benevolence of your Majesty. May the Almighty bless your Imperial Majesty, our great and magnanimous friend, with his constant guidance and protection. George Washington. Actual handwritten letter below. As you see above, the term Moor was used to describe our people as early as the 8th century and as late as the 17th century. Here sits the Pope who came to New York, the Empire State, and sat under the Moor's head, while those who are descendants of Moors debate as to the impacting validity of the honor of their direct ancestors. Below are 18 of the Moorish nobility, Moorish family crest in Germany. These Moorish nobility family crest were uncovered by Joel Rogers, who was a New Bun historian born in Jamaica. It has been said that Joel Rogers found more than 500 images of Moorish noble families in Europe, much like the ones below. Just imagine 500 Moorish nobility families, crests that are purposely being hidden from the public to conceal the truth. This leaves another tremendous problem for them, because this is in Europe, not Africa. These are Moorish nobles' coat of arms, which are registered in Europe as royal families, not slaves and cotton pickers. The Iroquois, Moorish, Confederacy. The structure of the Iroquois Confederacy inspired the American colonists' development of the U.S. government. On June 11, 1776, while the question of independence was being debated, the visiting Iroquois chiefs were formally invited into the meeting hall of the Continental Congress. Theirs a speech was delivered, in which they were addressed as brothers, and told of the delegates' wish that the friendship between them would continue as long as the sun shall shine, and the waters run. The speech also expressed the hope that the new Americans and the Iroquois act as one people, and have but one heart. After this speech, an Onondaga chief requested permission to give Hancock an Indian name. The Congress graciously consented, and so the president was renamed Caranduan, or the Great Tree. With the Iroquois chiefs inside the halls of Congress on the eve of American independence, the impact of Iroquois ideas on the founders is unmistakable. History is indebted to Charles Thompson, an adopted European into the Delaware Moors, whose knowledge of and respect for American Indians, Moors, is reflected in the attention that he gave to this ceremony in the records of the Continental Congress. The Iroquois League was a model social order in many ways superior to the white man's culture of the day, and its form of government more nearly approached perfection than any that has been tried to date. Elmore Riemann, 1967. Because historians tend to focus on military engagements and changes in national boundaries, our population has little understanding of cultural and social interactions. In an interesting twist of interpretation, Felix Cohen proposed, in a 1952 article called Americanizing the White Man, that historians have seen America only as an imitation of Europe, but that the real epic of America is the yet unfinished story of the Americanization of the white man. He defines Americanism as largely a product of the influence of Indian, Moorish culture on the white European settlers. In an equally bold statement, Francis Jennings in The Invasion of America, Indians, Colonialism, and the Cant of Conquest, 1975, states that, what white American society owes to Indian society, as much as to any other source, is the mere fact of its existence. Early Euro-Americans voluntarily adopted methods, lifestyles, artifacts, and ideas from the indigenous people, often in order to survive. Moors in America provided half the modern world's domesticated food crops, numerous herbal medicines, clothing, transportation pathways and modes, crafts and artifacts, hygiene methods, and thousands of words including place names and ideas of governance that blended ideals of rugged individuality with concern for the common welfare. The Iroquois Republic had continuously existed since the 14th or 15th century. In 1930, Arthur Pounds Johnson of the Mohawk States wrote, with the possible exception of the also unwritten British Constitution, deriving from the Magna Carta, the Iroquois Constitution is the longest existing international constitution in the world. Known as the Great Law of Peace, this orally transmitted constitution describes a federal union of 5, later 6, Indian nations: Mohawk, Onondaga, Seneca, Oneida, Cayuga, and the Tuscarora, adopted in 1715. It was only put in writing in 1915 by Arthur C. Parker, archaeologist for the State Museum of New York. The Europeans and Iroquois of the mid-18th century were on more friendly terms. Many English nobles adopted the lifestyle of Indians and joined their nations. The treaty councils brought cultural exchanges in which leaders and statesmen met as equals to diplomatically solve problems and alleviate strained relations. The trade of Great Britain and the peace and prosperity of the colonies was dependent upon this alliance. During the era, Benjamin Franklin published 26 treaty accounts and represented the state of Pennsylvania as an Indian, Moorish commissioner. In the pre-revolutionary period, when he and his friends were advocating a federal union of the colonies, no European model was found to be suitable. That's why there were 3 different constitutions before our present constitution today. Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, Articles of Confederation, then the present Constitution. Franklin's contact with the Iroquois influenced many key ideas for a new form of government: federalism, equality, natural rights, freedom of religion, property rights, etc. At the 1744 Treaty Council, by Franklin's account, Canasatigo, speaker for the Great Council at Onondaga, recommended that the colonies form a union in common defense under a federal government. We are a powerful confederacy, and by your observing the same methods our wise forefathers have taken, you will acquire much strength and power. Therefore, whatever befalls you, do not fall out with one another. In arguing for such a plan, Franklin stressed the fact that the individual nations of the Confederacy managed their own internal affairs without interference from the Grand Council. 20 years after Franklin's plan was defeated at the Albany Congress, it reappeared in the Declaration of Independence and the Articles of Confederation. Franklin, Jefferson, John Adams, and George Washington were all familiar with the Iroquois polity. The integration of this knowledge into their theories of utopias and natural societies further inspired the U.S. Founding Fathers. Each of the Iroquois nations was represented to the Confederate Council by a Lord of the Confederacy and one war chief. Their league included a system of checks and balances, and no action could be taken without the approval of all 5 Indian nations. Their notions of equality and liberty extended to women as well as men. In war, they never enslaved captives but offered to adopt those willing to accept the Great Law. Their own members could be alienated or expelled by not following the Great Law, and a non-member could be adopted by proposal or invitation with approval from the Lords. In their Constitution, the Lords of the Confederacy are described as mentors and spiritual guides of the people. Their hearts are to be full of peace and goodwill, and their minds full of yearning for the welfare of the people, including those of future generations. Their words and actions are to be marked by calm deliberation. They must be honest and have no self-interest. If they become wayward, they receive warnings first from the clan women, then from the men. If they persist in negative behaviors, they ultimately lose their position and possibly their life. The Lords are poorer than the common people. They own few material possessions and give away presents or plunder acquired by treaty or war. They are above pettiness and corruption and show no signs of selfishness. Those who recognize the wisdom and long history of the Iroquois government did not consider the Indians as mere savages. Like the Iroquois, Thomas Jefferson believed that public opinion and popular consent were key in maintaining freedom and good government. He held that the power of public opinion was an important reason for the Iroquois lack of oppressive government and class differences, and for the power to impeach officials who offended governing principles. Like the Iroquois, he also believed that the best government is the least government. In oratory, the Europeans compared the Iroquois with the Greeks and Romans. Both emphasized ethical proof in their arguments. The Indians, Moors, ended their orations with the words, hero and cone. Hero means I have said, and cone was spoken as an exclamation of joy or sorrow, depending on the occasion and circumstances. The French pronunciation of these words together became Iroquois. Unlike Europe, the Iroquois society was matrilineal. Women owned the land and the status of their lineage. They owned all possessions of their husbands after marriage except their horse and rifle. They took charge of the money, and were the tribe's educators and communicators of tradition. They female heirs of the Lords of the Confederacy were called Royana, noble. The Lord of the Confederacy was nominated by women and selected for qualities of trustworthiness, good character, honesty, faithfulness to the people and the nation, support of the family, and good management of personal affairs. There was not state religion, and the religious rites and festivals of each nation were safeguarded against being disturbed or interrupted. Civil duties were separated from those of the religious leaders, and festivals were held in the longhouses. In examining the vision of our forefathers and the many hundreds of years of the Iroquois Confederacy's success, we see how far we have strayed in just over 200 years. More and more a nation of law and order, with vast class and economic distinctions and political favoritism, we would do well to re-educate ourselves in the values of the Iroquois, Moors, honesty, good character, honor, the power of the spoken word and public opinion, and the high status of women. Documents you must know. 1. Free Moorish American Zodiac Constitution. Zodiac Constitution and Birthrights of the Moorish Americans. being Ali, Bey, El, Day and Al. Article 2, 2, Paragraph 2, 2. 2. United States Republic, Department of Justice, Moorish American Credentials, AA, 222,141, Truth, 01. 3. United States Supreme Court, Supreme Law, Acts of State. 4. United States Republic Constitution, Article 3, 3, Section 2, 2, Amendment, Ven. 5, Liberty Clause, and Amendment 9, 9, Reservation of the Rights of the People. 5. Resolution number 75, 75, dated April 17, 1933, A.D., Moorish American Society of Philadelphia and the use of their names. 6. Universal Declaration of Human Rights, United Nations, Human Rights, Article 15, 15. 7. Rights of Indigenous Peoples, United Nations, General Assembly, Part 1, Article 4. 8. Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1787. 9. The Declaration of the Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and People, UNGA number 1514. 10. The American Declaration of the Rights and Duties of Man, adopted by the 9th International Conference of American States, Bogota, Colombia, 1948 at Article 5, Article 17, Article 26. 11. Declaration on the Principles of International Law. 12. Executive Order Number 13,107, 63, Federal Register, 68,991, 1998. Implementation of Human Rights Treaties. 13. The Moors, Sundry Act of 1790.